Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Weekly Forecasts. As usual, we're going to be taking a look at Dixie first, starting on the weekly time frame. Now, this week is going to be a bit different because I want you to see me actually mapping structure real time. And if you haven't had a chance to, make sure to check out our market structure series, which we finally launched this week. All right. So on the weekly time frame, we broke swing structure at this point, right? Then, if we draw out our 50%, we can see that we tapped into the discount zone at this point, which is really good. And after that, we saw a break of internal structure here. All right. And since then, we've seen a pullback into this weekly demand, all right? And that's pretty much all the information we have so far for the weekly time frame. This week is actually really interesting because price didn't do exactly what we forecasted last week, but we are still within the higher time frame, overall objective. So we're going to take a look at that. Now at this point, this is where we broke swing structure on the daily time frame. Now don't worry, stay tuned to the markets structure series, and in no time you're going to know exactly how I map structure in a mechanical way. All right, so we broke swing structure at this point. Now if you remember correctly, initially we marked out this break of internal structure here, and our idea was that we would most likely see a reaction from either this daily demand zone here or this daily flip zone here, which is also a demand zone. But so far price has managed to simply just break through everything, right? And what we have is that we've broken internal structure to the downside. So there's no need to panic. What this simply means is that we haven't ended our pullback yet, right? Now remember, we talked about complex structure in our first episode of the market structure series. And this is something you're going to be seeing a lot of in reality as long as you're dealing with charts. Okay, so there's no need to panic. We are still within the higher time frame overall price action, order flow, if you will. So what we have here is that price has broken internal structure to the downside, right? Okay, and now because we're already in this weekly demand zone, we can start to take a look at some overlap zones. If you've seen enough of these videos, you know why I really like overlap zones. Okay, so this is this is the daily demand zone that we're currently in. This is another really good zone which you could refine to just this week, right? And I'd say this would be my final zone, which is it's formed kind of like a demand chain here. If you want, you could refine it down to this, but personally, I don't like to over refine my points of interest on my zones, if you will. All right. Okay. So if you look at this particular range of daily price action, we can see that we've already tapped into the discount, which was why we even entertained the idea in the first place that because price had broken internal structure, that we might see something like this. But instead, what we've seen is that we've broken internal structures and downside. So we could still see realignment at any point from now. Okay, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. But at the moment, daily internal structure is bearish, right? It's bearish. And I'd say this is the supply zone. This is the closest supply zone that I would consider. However, because we're already in the discount zone and we're expecting the pullback to end anytime soon, we could always see the supply zone fail. But remember, guys, it's the daily time frame. If you're a day trader or an intraday scalper, then you definitely find a lot of opportunities before that happens. Okay, so now on the 4-hour time frame, right? So on the 4-hour time frame, this break of internal structure in the daily just happens to be this break of swing structure on the 4-hour, owing to the fact that the market is fractal. Okay, now if you remember, last time we talked about how this was our last 4-hour break of swing structure, and we talked about how we might have a liquidity pool here, even though I don't like to mark out liquidity beforehand. Okay, we talked about how we might have liquidity here and how we might also have liquidity here as a possible confluence to the idea of price eventually breaking this high in order to indicate the end of the daily pullback, right? But so far that hasn't happened. And remember, I always say you have to respect order flow. You have to trade in the direction of structure, because market structure is king. So because the pullback had not ended, right, on the 4-hour time frame, what we had was the moment price tapped into this premium zone, right, tapped into this premium zone, tapped into a supply zone, okay, we saw an immediate push to the downside, breaking new swing structure. So that, my friends, is practically structure being respected, right? So at the moment, swing structure is bearish on the 4-hour, and I would say that this is a pretty short range, and it looks as though the pullback may have started, but I haven't seen, as far as the 4-hour goes, I haven't seen any confirmation yet that the pullback has started, right? Okay, now we can mark out some potential 4-hour zones, but if we go down to the 1 hour, and this is not something I usually do when I'm making these weekly forecast videos, right? But if we go down to the 1 hour and take a look at this, we will see that this was our last break of swing structure on the 1 hour, okay? And so far, there still isn't even any sign that the pullback has officially started on the 1 hour, because this was our last break of internal structure on the 1 hour, okay? But yeah, because we've broken swing structure on the 1 hour and on the 4 hour as well, there's every expectation that we may see a pullback begin very soon. And for me, what I'd really like to see is for price to take this, cause a failure of this supply, or change character, or rather break internal structure at this point, which will most likely be a change of character on a higher time frame. Okay, once we see that, now if I'm being super conservative, there are a couple of models I use to confirm my pullbacks. However, this, like I said, this range is pretty short, so before we see anything substantial, we might already have tapped into this premium zone, and the moment we do, we'll most likely be looking for shorts, right, until the market decides that it is time to possibly reverse and realign bullish. Okay, so that's pretty much that for the DXY. Let's take a look at GBPUSD starting on the weekly time frame. On the weekly time frame, we already know that this was our last break of swing structure, okay? And we initiated the pullback at this point when we changed character rather, and we pulled back for a while, tapped into this supply zone right here on the weekly, and at this point we broke internal structure to the downside. Okay, so this was very strong sign of bearish realignment, and since then we've been seeing a pullback back into this weekly internal range, if you will. Okay, and remember how we marked out this flip zone here. Why is it a flip zone? Because it's the last supply area that caused a failure of this demand zone. Okay, so that's why it's a flip zone. When we looked at it earlier this week, when we looked at the weekly forecast, and when we posted the daily analysis on the Telegram channel, we actually talked about how price might potentially take this high, okay, simply because of the impulse with which it moved. But in all my years of trading, one thing that I've really admired about price action, especially with the way that I map structure personally, mechanically, it's how precise price can be. Okay, so we didn't break this high, we didn't, but now we're seeing a really strong push, lots of sensitivity with the close of this weekly candle. Okay, so that might be a sign that this flip zone could potentially hold, right? However, let's scale down to the daily time frame. Okay, so let's get rid of this so we don't have a clutter. On the daily time frame, this is where we broke swing structure, right? And we've been pulling back for a while. Remember, in our previous video, we talked about how internal structure was still bullish, and if we're respecting order flow and structure, which we always do, always, right? You can quote me on that. We talked about how most likely the expectation was that price would tap into this demand zone. It had already tapped into the demand zone, and that we would see a break of this weak internal high here. Okay, and that's exactly what happened. So what we're seeing is that price is pretty much still bullish internally on the daily time frame, and now I would mark this out as my demand cluster, if we can call it that. Okay, now this range of price action, we're dealing with this internal range. We haven't yet tapped into the discount zone, but we might see that very soon. Okay, now remember, from what we looked at on the weekly time frame, there's a possibility that this might happen, and then this and this and this, but until that happens, we're going to be respecting order flow. Okay, now on the 4-hour time frame, again, I always like to point this out because the market is fractal. If you take a look at these internal breaks of structure, they're actually swing breaks of structure on the 4-hour. Okay, so this was the last break of swing structure on the 4-hour. So basically the daily internal range is the same as the 4-hour swing range. Okay, the expectation is that even if price manages to make it all the way down here, that we're going to be targeting this high, right? So we can mark out some of the closest demand zones that we see. Now this is easy for me because I have a set of, I try to keep everything about everything I do in the markets mechanical to a very large extent. So I have a couple of rules on how I pick the best demand and supply zones. Okay, my points of interest, if you will, and I'll probably make a video on that at some point in the future. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know why that's not coming. So this is where we're at currently. I'm not really going to start delving into the lower time frame, mostly because I don't like to do that when I'm dealing with weekly forecasts. But if you want to see more detailed lower time frame markups on a daily basis or near daily basis, then I encourage you to take advantage of the free Telegram channel, subscribe, and just tune in every morning for weekly updates. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much that. Last but not least, let's take a look at Euro US dollar. Okay, as always, start on the weekly time frame. On the weekly time frame, very similar to the GBP USD pair, we broke swing structure at this point. And so far we've tapped into this supply zone. Okay, and after tapping into the supply zone, we know that we broke internal structure to the downside. Very clean break, very encouraging bit of price action. I'd say a bit cleaner than GBP USD, but GBP USD still my favorite of the two. So don't even argue with me. Okay, so far we tapped into this supply zone on the weekly time frame. We've seen it push down, and we tapped into this demand zone here. That price left on pullback. Okay, and after we saw price tap into this demand zone, it pushed back up, and currently, so practically we're kind of between zones right now. We're currently between this supply zone and this demand zone, and it's left to see what's going to happen and which one is going to have its way, basically. Now, if we scale down to the daily time frame, what we're going to see is that this internal breakout structure is actually the swing breakout structure on the daily time frame. Okay, now what we have here is our break of internal structure on the daily time frame. So right now all we have is that daily internal structure is bearish, daily swing structure is bearish, weekly structure is bearish. Okay, weekly internal structure is bearish. So it's looking really good for the shorts, basically. Now we've tapped into this daily extreme supply zone, which is an overlap zone. Why? Because it's a daily supply zone within a weekly supply zone. We're seeing a lot of sensitivity so far. Okay, the expectation is that price is going to break this weak internal low. All right, so let's quickly take a look at the 4-hour time frame. Now, on the 4-hour time frame, again, remember, market is fractal. So what we have here is that this break of internal structure at this point was our break of swing structure. Okay, and it's actually really interesting because at this point, technically, by my mechanical methods, we had a break of swing structure here, and then we had another break of swing structure here by implication. Okay, but because of how quickly this happened, we could easily, for being a bit flexible, look at this as a liquidation of this strong low. Okay, and an immediate failure of supply. So yeah, essentially the 4-hour swing is practically still bullish. So on a shorter term, we could possibly be looking for some high probability longs. We don't know until the week opens, but at the moment we can mark out our points of interest. Okay, we can mark this out. I'll take this whole zone, and finally I will take this, kind of refining. So basically like a demand chain thing happening here. Mark out my range. Essentially, you wanted to get into the discount zone before looking for longs, practically. Now guys, I'm really sorry if this video has been a bit draggy. This is the first time I've done this while marking out simultaneously. I usually do the markups beforehand, but if you've made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm glad you stayed tuned to this point. Have a great week. Have a peaceful week and stay safe. Love you all. Bye.